I mentioned last month that the penny surtax, the 1 cent sales tax on anything $5,000 or less that gets a sales tax, like you don't own groceries, is going to come up for a vote in November in the general election. And so there is an opportunity for people to submit projects to be considered for that. And when you vote, you're actually going to be voting on a list of projects. The county's about halfway through the process of developing those projects. The total bundle of money that they're looking at is $2 billion collected during the period of 2025 through 2093. So it's a long time out, and it's a big pile of money. If you're interested in how it gets divided up, $908 million gets allocated to unincorporated Sarasota County, which includes us. 607 to the municipalities, like the city, and 500 million gets allocated to the schools. So it's 45, 30, 25. And this is in addition to the penny property tax that the school gets, that you'll get a chance to vote on in March. If you look at the total project funding the county has for unincorporated, in addition to that $900 million, there's $132 million in mobility fees, $80 million in gas tax, $55 million in utility rates, $40 million in planned assessments and capacity fees, and $368 million in transportation, grants, and other funding sources. So total of $1.5 billion. This is a lot of money. The process they're in is they had a task force and a website to collect projects. And that project list that came out of that is going to be reviewed by the county commission next Tuesday, the 8th. Okay? And it's just a preliminary list. It's labeled final, but this is a workshop form, so they're going to be talking and not taking any votes. And then they're going to have a public hearing, which is people can testify at, and they're going to take a formal vote to authorize it being on the ballot, and that's on March the 29th, so a couple months from now. And the referendum on this is, as I said, November the 8th. So, last month, we were distracted last fall by a bunch of things, like hotels. And so they didn't hold any meetings on here anyways. So we decided to get engaged. So we asked last month that you send us ideas. And there's a list of ideas, 47 of them, I think, that we collected and put together and have copies that we passed out here at the meetings. Preliminary to that, though, we sent last week a list of a half a dozen projects that were kind of high on our priority list, we thought. And Spencer Anderson has already written back and given us some comments on that. I'd like to share those with you. One was on crosswalk improvements along Midnight Pass and Beach Road. And they're supposed to be taking some improvements on those when they resurface the road later this year. They're undefined right now. They're going to make some intersection improvements as part of the resurfacing at Midnight Pass and Stickney Point, but they're undefined right now. But there are supposed to be new mast arms for the signals, new signs, new vehicle direction indicators, drainage and lighting. And we also suggested maybe a pedestrian bridge, but they said that's not in the works right now. We asked about bike lanes improvements on Midnight Pass, and that there should be some modifications to them and the sidewalks during this road resurfacing, but it's not defined right now. So all we can do is kind of get in the queue and see what will happen. But they said it would be part of the pavement management program of over this 15-year period. We suggested public restrooms at the gazebo in the village and maybe the beach accesses, for example, number 4 or 5 and number 7. And the answer back was, well, they're going to put a new restroom in at the North Patterson Park at the North Ridge, and the rest of them aren't on the list yet. So we'll have to keep lobbying for that. Intersection improvements at US 41 and Stickney Point. They said that's an FDOT issue, and he's communicated it on to the District 1 management. But I think it's going to take more than that. One thing that Christian Ziegler has been pushing is a beach parking information system. It would have sensors at the parking spaces at Turtle Beach and Siesta Key Beach, and there would be signs and an app that would show whether there's parking available on at those beaches off island, like off of 41. And it would cost about $1 million, and I think Christian's got a mind to push that a little bit. So we'll see.
Say the motion, like you say, on the driveway?
The parking sensors would be in each individual parking place. And the signs would be at Stickney Point and 41 and.
Oh, it did go.
I guess would you say again?
There's nobody out here that remarked. I don't know if they're going to interrupt. We want to go ahead and let you finish, Bob. Go ahead and finish what you
right. There is a long list that was published yesterday by the county. You can go on to the county website and watch the BCC meetings for next Tuesday in the afternoon. There's a long list of 3 pages of projects that the staff and the people that participated in the public meetings, like the one they had at Gulfgate last fall. And there's some interesting things in there. There's some pretty big ticket items. One of them is a records center for the county clerk, $18 million. Another one is a new county administration center, since they just sold the one they have right now, and that's $15 million. If they want money. And they want a fleet support center for the county fleet and fire and rescue, that's $14 million. The county history center, $15 million. A sports complex improvements in general, $12 million. Athletic field and facilities improvements, $12 million. Fruitville Road widening from to Camden Road to Lorraine Road, $13 million. Lorraine Road extension from Fruitville to Palmer, $24 million. Proctor Road widening from McIntosh to Honore, $18 million. Lorraine Road expansion, $1.3 million from the south of Clark Road to Knights Trail, $54 million. Calhoun Road from Fruitville to Packing House, $16 million. Pavement management, $181 million. Advanced right-of-way acquisition program, $20 million. Water quality improvements, $16 million. I saw one other one that was drinking water improvements for Siesta Key, which was a pretty good sized number. I'm not focusing on it right now, but there's a bunch of them. What I passed out today was a list that Joyce put together from all of the emails that you sent us over the past month. And so like I said, there's 48 items on there. And I'd like Siesta Key to approve sending a letter tomorrow to the commission saying we support these projects. We'd like for you to consider them as part of your workshop. And so I'd like to make a motion. So there's a second. Second by Tom. Any discussion? I call for a question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think opposed. Motion carries then. Thank you. I'm sorry we didn't get this out any sooner. I guess I'll ask Joyce if she can put it on our website, this list. And we'll send it off to the commission tomorrow and see what they say. I think they're feeling anxious right now about the attitude of people on Siesta Key. So maybe they'll give us kind of some slack.
We can strike while we are.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
I have one on this side.
Well, go ahead.
Oops. I don't see, someone raised their hand, but I don't see it. Could you unmute and speak if you raised your hand?
Margaret, this is Tom Barrett, and I'm, an owner over on Siesta Key. I just wondered, have any of the projects, I haven't seen it, I haven't gone to the website, so my bad on that, but I'm wondering, have they done anything to address or try to mitigate the issues that we see around red tide? I understand it's environmental, not infrastructure, but if we face those challenges and continue to do so, it will continue to impact the issues that we have around revenue generation, tax generation, if we don't address the root causes. Now, I know the state has looked into things. I'm just wondering if this special projects, I thought something was going on at Moat, is anything being done to address that? That's my comment.
We're going to get this right one day. I know we will. Sorry about that, everybody. But we're still in a learning mode. And boy, I'm just so amazed that Jean's actually on this trying to help us, given this. She's just had this surgery this week. So thank you, Jean.
Okay.
One of the things that I wanted to go on to, we have a guest tonight, and he hasn't met most of you, but he has been working for quite some time on the Save Siesta Key work for the Incorporation of Siesta Key. And he wants to give you an update, and I want to introduce him to you. He's been on that board this entire time. His name is Tim Hensey. He's lived in Sarasota for a long time and on the Key for the past 15 years, I think. And he's done a lot of good work in our area, including, I understand, for Sarasota Memorial Hospital. There's some building over there, I think, that you've worked on in the past. So you didn't know I knew that, did you? Anyway, Tim Hensey, he is also the chair now of the Save Siesta Key of the Incorporation effort. So come on up, Tim, and let us hear what's going on.
Thank you, Catherine. When we were asked to give an update to SKA by Catherine, I said, probably ought to go on the website and see what SKA is all about. When I started looking at the website, I said, I've lived out here actually only 13 years. And I said, these are all the things I care about, your mission, your statements, and the betterment of our community and quality of life out here. So I've been a member for the last 34 minutes. What I didn't know, because when we spoke earlier today, you said the best $35 you ever spent. When I filled out the application when I got here tonight, I didn't see about the legal defense fund. So I'll bring my $100 next month. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But so where are we? What happened? How many of you attended either virtually or in person delegation meeting? Pretty fair number of people. How'd you feel? Feel like our voices were heard? No. Not at all. We got, an old butt whooping behind the shed in politics is what we got. And that's the way politics work. So what we learned is that these incorporation efforts very rarely pass the first time, and it usually takes going back a second and a third time to get it done. And the good news is we can resubmit next August in 2022 and redo our feasibility study, correct the things that the legislators had issues with, resubmit and get in there and do it again with relatively minimal expense and effort. Kind of share some of the things that we can do to, get to that point next August. First of all, we're kind of reshaping and expanding the board. We've had a couple of board members resign, and we've just added one new board member. I don't know if y'all know her. Her name's Jody Tierney. She's a relatively new resident to the Key, but she's also a lobbyist. And that's a real art. It's not something that I have a great deal of expertise in. But Jody's a lobbyist. She's in Tallahassee all the time. And I think to have somebody on our board that understands how things work up in Tallahassee is going to be huge. We're also looking for some more talent on the board. We've said for a long time, we haven't gotten any, we haven't found anybody yet of somebody legal. Hardly anything you do in today's world doesn't require an attorney or requires some sort of legal expertise. And I think we were suffering from that the first time around. So we're hoping to get an attorney or a retired attorney to join our ranks to maybe give us some good advice on legal issues. The other thing we want talent-wise is the ability to fundraise. There are a fair amount of wealthy people on Siesta Key, and they all care about Siesta Key just like we do. And we think if we get the right people on board that can talk to their friends, we can raise some significant funds. And I think that's what's going to take to get some change. So, some of the other strategies we can do between now and August. Well, we can either supplement or replace our lobbyists in Tallahassee. Our feasibility study expert, Bill Underwood, recommended the lobbyist that we use, and I think he's a super nice guy. I enjoy working with him, but I'm not convinced that he had the stroke that he needed with the legislators. He was up there on our behalf, visiting them behind closed doors in their offices, etc. But I don't think our voice was heard. He told us on several occasions, you know that you're probably less than 50-50 of getting this done, and I think he was right. But we need probably somebody that can do even a better job of being networked with the right people to get it done. Another thing that we want to do is to meet with the legislators. You hopefully will be pleased to know that we met with all the legislators, Will Robinson, Tommy Gregory, James Buchanan, Fiona McFarland, Joe Gruters, Michelle Luckner. We met with all of them ahead of time, some of them 2 and 3 times. And we really didn't feel like, we'd ask them questions and we really didn't get a lot of feedback from them. And I'll kind of get to that in a second, what I think is going on there. But then once we understand what their concerns are, we can revise our feasibility study to address their concerns, and then we can resubmit in August of 22. Now, having said all of that, this is my personal belief that we are still slim odds of getting that done. And what I mean of getting it done is actually getting to incorporation. And why is that? Well, first of all, if you look at what's going on in Tallahassee right now, you've got a Republican governor, a Republican-controlled House, and a Republican-controlled Senate, and a Speaker of the House that is very, very anti-additional layer of government, local government. So, literally, we were fighting a huge political wave. So I'm going to give you some examples of why I think that is. Why did we get denied at the legislative meeting? Well, one of the things we heard was the 2-mile boundary, and there is in the statute, says that you can't have an incorporated city, town, or village within 2 miles of another incorporated city. Well, we can't solve that problem because the city of Sarasota actually has about 110 homes on the north end of the Key and Bay Island. We would butt up immediately against it. Now, we were told by staff early on that is a technicality, a formality, and that the House and the Senate could waive that with the snap of their fingers if they want to. But our legislators hung their hat on that, and if they continue to hang their hat on it, that's one we may not be able to overcome. So another thing we heard from Representative Robinson is, well, I don't believe your $250,000 proposed government light is enough. Well, we met with him on 2 separate occasions, and I don't know how many people have seen our feasibility study and read the details. But, you know, we've told him, look, if you look at the revenue side, we've got almost 3.6 million in revenue through 3 sources. One is ad valorem taxes, the other is a utility franchise fee, and the other is an infrastructure surtax fee. And of that 3.6 million, we developed a budget for our city, and it didn't even come up to $1.7 million. And in that budget, we had salaries for a town manager at $180,000, a finance director, I think it was $90,000, city clerk. We had all the bases covered in rent, utilities. We had $250,000 for legal fees to negotiate the agreements with Sarasota County. And that was all put together by a prior town manager for us. So it wasn't shooting from the hip. And I asked Representative Robinson when I met with him, I said, okay, I hear you. You don't think the 0.25 mils is adequate, but we think that it is because our property values are almost $7 billion out here on the Key. So we're collecting a lot of money. But you look through our budget and tell us what we're missing. Well, did you remember what he said at the delegation meeting when I told him we had a $180,000 budget for a town manager plus 45% for benefits like 401k and major health? Anybody remember what he said? He said,
Not enough.
I'm concerned that's not enough.
Yeah.
I did the research on the internet. You know what the average town manager salary in the state of Florida is?
I don't think it's
$84,000.
not 100 million.
$100,000 less than we had in our budget. So what were some of the other reasons of not being denied? Well, Representative Gregory said, you come back next year, and if you get 50% of the residents to sign petitions, then you'll have some stroke. Well, let me give you a little history behind it. We started out with petitions. I would imagine most of you signed a petition saying, not that you were necessarily for it, but you just all think it would go to a vote, right? So we had collected over 2,000 petitions, which is, about 28% of the total voting public registered on Siesta Key, not the 50% that Representative Gregory was asking for. But we were told early on by staff, there's no petition requirement, don't focus on it. So we let off the gas pedal on that, and then at the last minute, he came back and threw it in our face. Now, let me tell you what else happened the day after our legislative delegation meeting. Anybody ever heard of House Bill 1035?
No.
Well, House Bill 1035 was voted on and made law the day after our delegation meeting. And here's the essence of it. You now, in order to become an incorporated entity, have to do a straw vote and get 60% of your residents to sign a petition.
60.
You can submit. And so this is just more clear evidence that that current level of government up there in Tallahassee is very anti-local government, anti an additional layer of government. They're making it more difficult to become.
6%.
I didn't hear a lot of other concerns. James Buchanan, something about
Amy,
tell me what your infrastructure projects are.
get on mute.
But in every single case, when we met with them one-on-one ahead of time, and we asked them, what are your concerns? They were silent. And then they came up with all this stuff at the legislative delegation. I personally don't believe that we got a fair shake. I think that, the Speaker of the House is pretty powerful, and, he couldn't control the one Democratic legislator Michelle Rayner, because she's a Democrat. And you know how party lines are in Tallahassee and even at the federal level. But he could control those 5 Republican legislators and senators. And it's my personal belief that our vote was predetermined. And I think we got hosed. So what do we do about it? I don't know that we have all the answers. I'm going to tell you from a legal standpoint. And by the way, one of our other board members, Dr. Steve Lexow, is joining us. And Steve's done a lot of this research. But from a legal standpoint, Steve's led the charge. Save Siesta Key is actually a 501c4. So from a legal standpoint, we are allowed to get involved in issues, but we may not support candidates. So SSK is probably not the entity. Is of a group of Siesta Key citizens we want to go forward and maybe make our voice heard a little bit more. Now, I'm going to back up for a second and just tell you a little bit about my background. For 41 years, I ran Gilbane Building Company, the 5th largest construction company in the United States. I was the area manager and ran all of Florida, and then scaled back later in my career to just Southwest Florida, which is essentially Tampa to Fort Myers. A lot of the local projects that we build around here, Catherine, brought up that we just finished the new Sarasota Memorial Hospital at Venice, $250 million hospital for our community. We built Riverview High School, Pineview High School, Venice High School, the new Parish High School. I built Hollywood 20 downtown, and I could probably go around the community and tell you some of the things we built. But what Gilbane Building Company isn't, just to be clear, we're not a Pat Neal or a Randy Benderson or a Carlos Baruth. We're not developers, and we don't do residential. And I got to get out of the habit of saying we, because I retired December 31st, and I have been loving retirement. So I'm kind of looking for something new to do, and my passion is Siesta Key. So there has been some talk about forming a PAC. It can't be Save Siesta Key. I don't know if it could be SKA. I don't know enough to even speak intelligently about it at this point. But I'll tell you, in my background, I, at one point in time, was the chairman of the Argus Foundation and sat on that board for about 15 years. I also was on the Gulf Coast Builders Exchange and sat on that board for over 15 years. I was on the Education Foundation and chairman of the Education Foundation. And I also formed and ran the second largest PAC in the state of Florida for about 5 years. And what all those organizations have in common is they have PACs, Political Action Committee. And when it comes for an election cycle, they interview candidates and they make a decision in a given race, whether they're going to support a candidate, not support a candidate. And in some cases, they, decide not to support any candidate because they think, the candidates that are running, all deserve endorsed status, so to speak. But it's interesting that, and then a PAC, of course, can give a lot of money to a given candidate. And I don't think on Siesta Key we're ever going to get to where we need to get until we get our wallets behind our voice and actually make some action. There's 7,000 of us out here. I think we've got the ability to do it. If you just do the simple math, we can raise a lot of money. And then the representatives, the senators, the county commissioners, the city commissioners, even school board members, they're going to start paying attention to Siesta Key if we're able to do that as a group. So I got a little bit off the subject of what SSK is doing update, but that's my editorial of how we go forward potentially. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So listening to everything you said, one of the major things I think is how many voters you actually get to sign a petition. I can understand where they're coming from. So is your plan for August to try to get 60% or more?
Yes, it It is. And that's going to take a lot of effort. You know, one of the things we did is that we had neighborhood ambassadors, and we had maybe about a dozen neighborhood ambassadors. My wife was one on Island Circle, and we have 160 homes on Island Circle, so she kind of volunteered for that. But that's only 160. Another individual did Cape Lady, but I don't feel like we got full penetration, not only in every neighborhood, but also the condominiums. And you know, it's tough because we've got a lot of part-time residents, but we were literally doing a door-to-door campaign where we had relationships, asking people for petitions and asking them for financial support. So I can't promise you we're going to get that 50%, but we're going to try to do a better job.
How about the Siesta Key Condo Association? Because, I mean, each one has a representative from their condo. I would guess not all of them, but maybe 25% are Florida residents. Maybe we bring them in. That could help that process.
We tried to do that, and Frank Jarenka, the head of the Condominium Association, was wonderful. He supported us openly. He sent letters to every one of his members. He asked them to support. He asked them to do petitions. I'm just not sure how much capture rate we got. Lourdes? Slightly different group, you're correct. And somebody between Gregory and Buchanan's going to prevail. It's interesting that the two of them are buds now, and they're going to be against each other shortly. So that'll be an interesting race. And by the way, just to my point of getting behind candidates, financial support, et cetera, I am abundantly aware of how much fundraising Gregory and Buchanan are already doing behind the scenes to line up their offers. It is substantial. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Tim, by the way, first and foremost, thank you and all those involved. Your efforts have been extraordinarily impressive, and I totally agree with you. It was a total hose job. It was embarrassing to have literally 100% of people there in favor of incorporation. Making a superb argument, and it was abundantly clear with that 3-3 vote that 3 votes were lined up in advance by the person who essentially selected the 6. So you did everything you possibly could, but there was nothing you could do because it was dead on arrival. So the question I have is one. I've been reading some stuff about Sarasota, potentially interested in incorporating Siesta Key. What's the status of that? What's your take on it? I'd be interested in that.
So Catherine can answer that as easily as I can, but I'll go ahead and then she can chime in. We have a meeting. There's 6 of us representing SKA, SK, the Save Siesta Key, the Condominium Association, and the Coalition meeting with the city on February 16th. We're going to have about an hour conversation with Marlon Brown, the city manager, the mayor, Eric Arroyo, and one other gentleman, I forget his title. And Catherine said it best in an email the other day. We're going to do a lot of listening. I can't, in my mind, see how joining with the city would work from a millage standpoint. And it looks to me like there's a lot more in it for them than us, but I will commit to having an open mind and listen to them. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Tim, could I just follow up on that? So, I don't know how many of you have gotten this in the mail. This is a flyer that came in yesterday. It tells us to vote yes for county-wide elections, make local government accountable to all voters, which is like, totally, completely ridiculous. It's, by the way, funded by Suncoast Alliance, which according to this flyer is located in Tallahassee, Florida. Okay, so Tallahassee is telling us, and then instead of being able to vote for commissioners that we want, okay, that will represent our district, they want to now take a county law. Okay, so this is what, it looks like in terms of, of the people's will. That's a big mistake. And if you don't mind, I come from Philadelphia. So I was the head president of the Society Hill Civic Association. That's a historic district of Philadelphia. Government worked for us, okay? Big city Democratic government worked for us because we had a dedicated council person. So anything that happened in our district, we voted for that representative. And so if our civic association was against something, that representative wanted to get reelected, he or she, okay, needed to be responsible to us. There is no responsibility here. So what I would just say in terms of your conversations with the city is, are you willing to give us a dedicated person? And therefore, anything that essentially, by the way, Philadelphia, the way it worked was, if the city council person wasn't in favor of it, it didn't happen.
2 minutes.
Okay? So if you're willing to give us that situation where we have that kind of control, that may be a more pragmatic approach rather than having to fight our way through what clearly is a rigged system, both for Sarasota County and for the state.
No, thank you for those comments. I mean, obviously, you're one speaking to single member districts versus countywide elections. And, the Sarasota County voters overwhelmingly approved single member districts in the last election. And it's a little bit frustrating that, number one, it's showing up on March 8th ballot with the school board re-up. And if you see the wording that's come out of the supervisor of elections, it's some pretty sneaky, tricky wording that almost seems like you're correcting a wrong. Right. And I'm a little bit frustrated over the whole thing, but I hear you loud and clear. Now, I've heard verbally, and what I think we'll hear on the 16th is that the city would be expanding the commission to 7 members and promising Siesta Key a dedicated commissioner. I think we'll hear that, but we'll report back to you. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to reiterate what I said in the previous meeting. The problem is we have no representation on Siesta Key. We did it one time. The commissioners that represent us do not live on the Key, so they really don't care. The big thing to do is to get a commissioner that represents Siesta Key. This way he has a vested interest in the Key, not outsiders that we have as commissioners. And you weren't here when I said it before. I asked, are there any commissioners that live on the Key? And everybody said no. Well, there's a problem. You have to have representation. And the person who does not live on the Key doesn't care.
I don't disagree with you one iota, but what you have to have is you have to have A, an individual willing to run, and B, an individual that has the ability to win.
We did, but
yes, sir.
Unfortunately,
She was terminated.
Yes, sir.
When you use the term signers on petitions and so forth, are you referring to legal residents of Siesta Key or just a property owner who may have a legal residence elsewhere?
So we had both. We had a total of 2,400 and some odd number of petitions signed, and 1,600 and what was it, 87 of those were registered voters on Siesta Key. And others were people that were just visitors that, heck yeah, I care about this place. And some residents that don't live on the Key but love Siesta Key. So we had a mix.
But what's needed for this number that you're referring to now?
The requirement is 60% of the registered voters on Siesta Key.
Who vote in the straw vote?
Yeah, correct. In other words, if there's only a 40% voter turnout. We need 60% of 40.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah. You carefully avoided saying, let's vote all these Republicans out and put some other people in. It seems to me that's the obvious answer. Now, it's going to take several election cycles to do all that. But is there some reason that's not the right way to go?
I hear you loud and clear. That may take a few years, as you suggest. But yes, we need different legislators in there, and we need a different Speaker of the House. I mean, my personal opinion, and I'm not a professional politician, but the Speaker of the House is extremely powerful, and I think he can control his Republican constituency. So he had the ear of four of them. And, you know, that's the way politics work. Any other questions? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
As you know, there are 3 legal actions that we're interested in. One of them has to do with the continuing fight about the Siesta Promenade. And the state's response is due next week to Jim Wallace's lawsuit. And the appeal is about whether he has standing or not. And I think he already has a smoking gun that said the DOT admitted he has standing. So we'll see where that goes, but he has to get standing first. On the other 2 that have to do with the hotels, on Jim Wallace's, the county responded with the normal boilerplate about standing and that it's not a good issue, but they didn't do necessarily an outstanding job, and Jim's team is due to respond. There's Lourdes, I think you're kind of in the same boat, if I get it right. That they complained about your lack of standing because you live not next door.
Harm, it's more of harm. They didn't complain about where I live, they complained, was I harmed?
Good. And harm more than anybody else on average, I think. Yeah, so, you know, that's sort of a debate, but the other steps that have happened is you got through all the preliminaries, both of them, and there are trials set in 2023. So sort of the next thing that is going to happen on those cases, there's, at least for Lourdes, there's discovery in the summer, experts and stuff like that. The other pathway that's going on is both hotel developers have chosen to try to intervene, which means they would be another defendant and they could stand up and talk as much as the county does. And if the lawsuit was lost and there were legal costs assessed, that they would be able to claim their legal costs. So it's more of a threat than anything else. So those are just kind of moving along. And I think Lourdes's lawyer did a really good job on responding to that. Had great arguments. And I don't think Jim's lawyers have responded yet. You know, they're about a week behind, but next Friday, the 11th, there's a hearing for Jim's case on motions to intervene. So the judge is going to decide whether to let SKA intervene in that case. So it's just kind of plodding along, unfortunately. And the only other thing I would say is one of the things that the developers, each one didn't do, was ask for a side and rear setback variance from the 20-foot required, even though it was a minimum of 20 feet. And I think the true reading was that it should have been 20 feet plus a 4-for-1 increase for height above 35 feet, which would have taken the Miramar up to 34 feet or something like that. And they just ignored it. Originally, they were going to do it, and they said, well, never mind. The staff said, never mind. And Loris did a good job of pointing out, as did the coalition, that, wait a minute, that's not what the original law that's supposed to be binding says. And it's an intensity and density issue. So in March, the county is going to consider amending the UDC, Uniform Development and Zoning Code, to say that, oops, we made a mistake. It really should have said, in addition to 20 feet for, if you're going to go up to 50 feet, then that's an extra 15 divided by 4, and you get about 4 more feet. And in their filing on it, it says, we made a mistake in a typo in 2003, and that the 2 new hotels would be non-compliant, but grandfathered. So, now does that frost you? It doesn't. So I guess we'll try to say something whenever they get in front of the planning commission and and I think there'll be some people who will complaining about it. But it was heartening anyways to see them admit that it was wrong. And especially for Siesta Key in the overlay district, it should have been an admission of guilt, which I think it was. No. Are there any questions about where it stands?
No.
That's all I got. Doris, you want to correct me on anything or add anything?
Oh, no, you covered it pretty well. I think, we have to just keep going and going forward. Every step they take, then we respond to.
Yeah. I'm sure at some place there's going to be a motion to dismiss, and we'll have a fight about that. But I think that's about all.
Before you adjourn, Catherine, Bob, is there any chance that the SKA will take an official stand on single member districts with the condo council this time? I mean, I asked that because we discussed it at our last board meeting, and we didn't come up with any official proclamation, but I can say that a number of people on our board very strongly support single member districts. And just as the gentleman earlier discussed, are very disappointed in the disingenuous way that the county commission approached this, and the way they worded the referendum proposal. Suffice it to say, some of us, at least at SSKI, believe very strongly that it's very important for the future of Siesta Key and for all of Sarasota County that single member districts be upheld. So I personally would implore you to vote no for that second issue. And Catherine, what about SKA?
Our board has not met to make that kind of statement. What our board generally does is accept the voting that occurs. And we have discussed this, and we've discussed it with the coalition as well. And the fact that we try to stay not political is always a fine line, because it does seem a lot of times things are along party lines. One of the things that we did agree, all of us, is that we don't feel having had single member districts for less, but actually just 2 years, gives people enough information about how well they can work. It's too short a time. And I think that because we haven't had people elected truly that live in the districts, and understand how we as Siesta Key live out here or in any coastal areas, I think we don't have information to say that we should change it yet. It is what it is. And I think that's about as close as anyone can say. The single member districts were approved and voted in by well over a majority of voters. I have no interest in changing the will of the largest majority of voters. And I also think that we have not had enough information yet to say that it's not going to work for us. And people would say, well, no one's helped us. And I felt that way myself. But only having had a couple of years of having the opportunity to see that with people that we actually chose and had a chance to have input in the best way, I don't think we have enough information to say, change it. I think giving an opportunity for full 4-year cycles for a lot of these people to have a chance to do what they say is very important. And that, I don't know how the other board members feel, because we have not had that conversation to say. But I think that's as fair as I personally, and I don't know if others have different viewpoints, they're all, first able to say what they would like to. And I agree with you, we need someone that I think understands how we live. We have had people, my concern has been the way the districts were modified, because I don't feel that people that don't live in a coastal environment understand the issues that occur with people who live here as residents, as businesses, the environmental issues, and we don't have a coastal district, if you think about it. They've carved it out, so there's a little bit of coastal, a little bit of middle, and somebody out east. And I think it's hard to get someone who really understands your community when they're not bound by the issues of your most immediate environment. And I think that's a very important issue for us, especially because we are a significant economic driver. And I would like to have somebody who really is from the coastal environment of the barrier islands to understand that and be our representatives in the future.
I would just add to that I don't think single member districts is purely a Republican.
No, I don't think it is either. Absolutely not. Yeah,
It's got a lot of bipartisan support.
I think it does.
There was an excellent op-ed, I believe it was yesterday's Herald Tribune, by a guy named Mike Hutchinson, who ran unsuccessfully, but was almost successful in running for the county commission District 1 in 2020. He's a conservative Republican, and he said because of single member districts, he was able to get something like 48% of the vote. He came within 190 votes of winning that seat. And I hate to say it, but looking back, if he had won that seat that was won by Mike Rand, when the first hotel came up for approval, Kristen Ziegler voted against it, Nancy Turk voted against it. If Hutchinson had been on the county commission, it might have been defeated.
I agree.
It might have been a whole different future for Siesta Key. And we might, it galls me to look back and think we might have come to 190 votes of having that voice. And to what Tim said, if there were a pact supporting people like Mike Hutchinson from the Miami area, there's so many people in Sarasota County who are opposed to overdevelopment. Somehow we need to get them together and support candidates like Mike Hutchinson.
And that might be the one way to gather people's information, to really know who they are and know what's a priority. And it's not just living somewhere, but it's also really embracing the future. I think for most of us, we think about, well, what will people see here in 10 years? Every time I leave the Key and I drive 3 miles, I go, when did that happen? I'm like, what? And I find myself going the wrong way or, wondering what's going on. And I think we do have, when you have a neighborhood, like I think we do on Siesta Key, and when we have people that are of like mind in terms of wanting to have a goal that it is preserved and available to people from wherever they come, and that we fear losing that to welcome people. And then when people use your words and say, you are selfish rich people out here and you don't want us, you're trying to keep us out, which is what one of the planning commissioners said to us, basically. You're less than 2% and the gates are now open. And I was deeply, deeply offended by that statement, because if there's any a neighborhood or a barrier island that's been more welcoming than we have been trying to keep it here for everyone, I don't know of one. And that was, I will say her name someday when it is relevant. But people that were at that hearing know who it is. Thank you. Anyway, thank you all for tonight. Thank you for hanging in all this time, and thank you for the great conversation and all your help. And we're now adjourned. Thank you.